Hey y'all, this is Dr. Hines, moving on to part 2 of the Hydrogen Spectra Lab. So I'm going to have you take a look at this right here where we are at in the procedure. We're at part 2, and what I'm going to do is, for sure what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the hydrogen lamp, and the idea is that you'll see the whole hydrogen spectrum. We're also going to post the actual individual lines in the hydrogen spectrum. So filling out these colors and wavelengths, this is something that's going to be posted online for you to take a look at those specific values. All I'm going to simply do is kind of show you just what in general what these elements are going to do. So here's the setup of what we've got here. This is our power supply. This is a very high voltage. Again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take these electrons and put them into an excited state, and then when they go from the excited state back to the ground state, they're going to emit light. So this is going to be the excitation of the electrons. Now I have a lot of tubes right here, and for sure this is the one that we're going to do is the hydrogen tube. So it's kind of like a low pressure, it's filled with hydrogen gas. It's very, very low pressure. And just to kind of quickly, not specifically, but I've got several other tubes sit out here. And I think as part of your procedure, I think you're just supposed to pick one of these tubes and basically kind of fill out down here in the bottom portion. It's like, okay, well, which tube did you ultimately work with, and what kind of colors comes along with the spectrum of that particular substance. Now, in theory, when you put a tube into the power source, this is going to light up just like a light bulb. Now, in theory, what we would like to be able to do is to be able to take this light and separate it out into the different colors of its spectra. And you would use one of these little spectroscopes to do that. This one here is actually kind of fancy. I really like this one here. It really separates the line spectra there. But unfortunately, with the camera that we've got, we don't think that we're going to be able to actually see the actual line spectra through the spectroscope. So that's why we're actually going to post the spectra online so you can see what it would look like if you were to look through this spectroscope right here. So I think what I'm going to do now is just kind of do the individual elements and compounds. So this is the hydrogen, okay? Turn on the power supply, and you see this particular color of light, but what you have to realize that is if you take this light and run it through a spectroscope, that it would actually take this light and it would actually separate it into the different color spectra. But unfortunately, you're probably not going to be able to capture that on the camera. So in theory, you would have the line spectra. You'd be writing down colors and wavelengths associated with those. So now I'm going to move into some other selections. I'm just going to put in a variety of tubes here. Let's see what we have here. I've got a nitrogen tube. And if you think about nitrogen, it's like, oh, that's like 80% of our atmosphere. So let's see what nitrogen would look like. And sometimes these are a little bit tricky getting the tube in there. All right, so here's nitrogen. Nice, kind of really pretty peachy color there. I think it's a really, really pretty color. So this is what nitrogen looks like. In theory, if you took this light and you separated it out into its spectra, you would see individual lines, all the colors that make up this peachy color right here. So let's move on to another tube here. And let's see what we have to play with here. We've got, neon. Neon is one of my favorites right here. Okay. Think about a neon sign. You know, those glowing signs. And what does a real neon sign look like? Well, this is what a real neon sign would look like. Wow, really bright, intense red, and you're thinking, wow, that's all I see is red. But in theory, if I take this spectroscope and I were to take that red light and separate it out into all of its colors, you'd be amazed at what other colors are like hidden within the red color. All right, let's move on to some other tubes here. Let's see here. We got a trivia question. What planet does Superman live on? Let's plug that element into the power supply. So we have Krypton. This is what Krypton looks like. You see, it's got a really faint light blue color. I don't know, I have to kind of sometimes wonder if headlights might not actually use this gas to kind of give it that kind of white type of bluish type of color there. Oops. Let's see what else we got to play with here. We've got a, okay, so this will be kind of interesting here. So we did the hydrogen. I'm going to do oxygen. That's the second component of our atmosphere. So this is what oxygen looks like. Kind of similar to that Krypton one that we had there. Kind of got that faint blue color to it. And now the last tube that I'm going to do is kind of make it kind of interesting here. So the last tube has got water vapor in it. Okay, so you got to imagine that water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, right? And you did see a hydrogen tube and an oxygen tube, but these were elements. Well, now we're going to take a look at a compound that's got hydrogen and oxygen in it, and let's see if it looks like one or the other, or maybe a combination of both, or maybe something completely different. So here we have our water vapor. So in my opinion, it's got a little bit of flavor of hydrogen in it, a little bit of flavor of oxygen in it, and maybe that's kind of what we should expect for a compound that's got hydrogen and oxygen in it. And I might also kind of mention this as well. You know, with all this exoplanet, whatnot, I mean, how do you know that an exoplanet has water on it? Well, what you would do is you would take a look at the light from that planet. The sunlight passes through the planet's atmosphere, and then an astronomer would take a look at that light, and they could say, hey, we can tell that there's hydrogen in that atmosphere and quite possibly water on that planet, okay? All right, well, that finishes up all the emission tubes that I have right here. And again, your job is to focus on filling out the table for the hydrogen, and then you can select any one of these tubes that I've done right here, and you just indicate which one that you wanted to use, and then you would indicate the wavelengths of color that are present in that. And we'll post the spectra for those.